Welcome to End of the Road in Michigan, the podcast that traces the lost trails, the empty corners, and the faded stories that built this state. I'm your host, and today we're checking in at a hotel that didn't just outlive the town it started in. It got up and moved. This is the story of a building that stood through wildfires, railroads, elopements, beer bans, and small-town reinvention. For over a century, it adapted with the times and the people who passed through it. This is the tale of the Grand Central Hotel in Kinde, Michigan, formerly the Crescent House in what would turn into a ghost town called Port Crescent, and how it became a pillar of community life in Michigan's thumb. Our story starts where the Pinbog River meets Lake Huron, the site of the long-lost town of Port Crescent. In the 1870s and early 1880s, this lumber town was alive with sawmills, schooners, and steam engines. The air smelled of cedar and pine. Ships loaded with cut timber sailed for the growing cities of the Midwest. Port Crescent was booming. And in the center of this boom stood the Crescent Hotel, operated by William Carter and William McCoy. They welcomed guests from across the state, traveling merchants, lake captains, loggers with pay in their pockets. It was more than a place to sleep. It was where deals were made, gossip was shared, and celebrations rang into the night. But by 1881, the town's luck turned. The Thumb Fire, a wildfire driven by drought and wind, scorched over 1 million acres across the region. Port Crescent survived the flames but not the fallout. The lumber ran out. The mills went quiet. Families left. Businesses closed. Yet Carter and McCoy weren't ready to quit. They believed their hotel still had a purpose, if not in Port Crescent, then somewhere else. In an era when most buildings were built to last but not to move, they decided to do the unthinkable. They moved the entire structure, beam by beam, or possibly on timber rollers, inland. We are not sure how it was moved, but it went to a place with promise. That place was Kinde, Michigan. Founded just a few years earlier, Kinde was growing fast thanks to the arrival of the Port Huron and Northwestern Railroad in 1882. With good farmland, a grain elevator, and navy bean and sugar beet crops on the rise, it became a center for the surrounding agricultural economy. By the 1890s, Kinde was the beating heart of this stretch of Huron County. When the Crescent Hotel was reassembled across from the railway depot along Main Street, it reopened under a new name, the Grand Central Hotel. With a broad front porch, wooden siding, and a livery stable nearby, it was a familiar sight for travelers arriving by rail or wagon. It had style, but not pretension. Comfort, but not luxury. It was a working man's hotel, and it did steady business. And over the decades, it became a witness to history. In the summer of 1903, the hotel made headlines, and not for its hospitality. 2 young couples from Northville, Michigan, eloped and fled north, hiding out in Kinde. But the hotel's proprietor, Peter Bushy, smelled trouble. He wired authorities by telegraph, and sure enough, 2 angry fathers showed up on the night train to drag their children back home. No wedding, just one very memorable checkout. Stories like that made the hotel more than a building. It was woven into the town's story. Lodge meetings were held there. Farmers drank there after harvest. Salesmen passed through. And even as the Great Depression and World War II reshaped rural Michigan, the Grand Central endured. In the 1930s or 1940s, it got another facelift, and a new name. The exterior was redone in brick masonry, with arched entryways and a wraparound porch. Locals began calling it the Clancy Hotel, likely named after its new owners. It was still the same old building underneath, but now it had a modern face. Through the mid-20th century, it kept operating as a mix of tavern and boarding house. Rooms upstairs, bar downstairs. During the Prohibition era, the saloon likely went dry, at least publicly. But by the 1940s, it was again a social spot. Clancy's was where locals shot pool, argued about weather, and remembered better harvests. And then, another name change. In the 1960s, it became the Wagon Wheel Inn. The name reflected the rustic Americana aesthetic of the times. Wagon wheels, horseshoes, and hand-painted signs were all the rage in tavern culture. But in Kinde, it wasn't just branding, it was still the community's meeting place. In January 1972, a woman named Lynette Hahn took over operations. Known as tough, fair, and funny, Lynette ran the wagon wheel for over a decade. Locals remember her behind the bar, telling stories, pouring drinks, running a tight kitchen, fish fries on Fridays, homemade chili in winter, and cold beer all year round. This was no roadside chain. This was a true small-town inn, with creaky floors upstairs, painted walls from another era, and regulars who'd been coming in since before the Clancy name even went up. We'll be right back after this message.
Love this story? There's more waiting for you at MichiganForYou.com, your online guide to Michigan and Great Lakes history. From ghost towns and shipwrecks to lost resorts and backroad legends, we cover the stories that make this region unforgettable. Head to Michigan4U.com and start your next deep dive into the places and people that shaped the Mitten. That's Michigan4U.com, where Michigan stories come alive.
Welcome back. Let's continue. By the 1980s, change came again. The rail depot was long gone. Highways had pulled traffic away from the village, and small-town hotels were giving way to motels, diners, and convenience stores. Eventually, the Wagon Wheel closed. The rooms upstairs went dark. The neon beer signs flickered out. But the building stood for a while longer, a brick landmark with a wooden soul. Locals driving by knew what it once was. They remembered stories from their grandparents about dances, drinks, elopements, and Saturday nights that turned into Sunday mornings. And then, sometime after 2018, it was gone, demolished, a hole where history once stood. But the legacy? That hasn't gone anywhere. The Grand Central Hotel Kinde was more than a building. It was a traveler's stop, a barstool confessional, a witness to Michigan's shifting identity. It bridged the lumber boom and the farm belt, trains and trucks, telegrams and phone lines. It changed names but never lost its purpose, to be a place where people gathered. If you drive through Kinde today, the hotel's gone. But stand on the corner of Main Street, close your eyes, and you might still hear the echo. Boots on the porch, a screen door slamming, the hum of conversation over a clinking glass. Thanks for joining me for this episode of End of the Road in Michigan. If you enjoyed it, follow, leave a review, and share it with someone who loves hometown history. And if you've got photos, memories, or stories about the Grand Central, Clancy's, or the Wagon Wheel, we want to hear them. End of the Road in Michigan, where forgotten stories still matter.